Welcome. This is the Drupal usability meeting for October 4th, 2024. I'm Benji Fisher moderating, and also present are Ralph Kohler sharing their screen and Simo Helston. Go ahead, Ralph.
Thanks, Benji. I've re-raised the issue we've discussed last week. It's issue number 2983456, exposed triggering update of media metadata and thumbnail to end users. We've discussed it last week, and while I wanted to write up a summary, there I ran into one or two open questions we haven't really tackled, and I've asked on the Slack channel, but we haven't come to a conclusion yet, though I thought it's the better choice. Quickly discuss in the first 5 to 10 minutes, hopefully, of today's meeting, and then go on to another issue. Just for the context, last week we've agreed on that basically in case update metadata works, then that status message is totally fine. But the point is, we've agreed and had a consensus that in case of an error, there should be a confirmation page, meaning in the context of scenario B, meaning a remote source for media item X is unavailable, try again later, was the status message we came up with. And scenario C is basically that a source file for a media item is actually missing. So it's impossible to refresh. Problem is, or the question is, how first, which microcopy to use on the confirmation page, and then more interestingly, the question, should there be a status message? Meaning for scenario B, we have, in case the remote source is unavailable, we had the buttons retry and cancel. So should there be a status message for the retry button, or should there be a status message for the cancel button? And on the other way around, for scenario C, we had the button remove thumbnail and cancel. And same question, should there be some sort of status message to give some sort of feedback if which action was taken? So basically, because on cancel, personally, I'm uncertain what actually is happening. It makes me think. But also, on the other hand, if you have remove thumbnail or retry, give a feedback what is happening. So that is the open question. Oops, I can
Okay.
also move
I
back.
guess my first thought is that anytime you have a confirmation form, there's a possibility that someone will accidentally press enter or maybe just have a stray mouse click and not be sure which option they chose.
Yep.
So I think it's always good to have a status message after the confirmation
Yeah.
form.
I'm thinking a bit kind of having a bit less. I'm thinking that if you click cancel, the status doesn't change. So there is no change in status. So status message kind of it feels a little bit redundant to have a status message that kind of says status quo. It's but when it like that kind of comes to my mind when I think about the actual word status. But then I think if it's something like there kind of should be maybe some kind of another kind of announcement, because there is yeah, could it be its wording doesn't really feel like correct one.
Yeah, I certainly think a warning would be too much, but if I accidentally um, trigger the cancel button, then the confirmation page goes away, and I think, oh no, what did I do? What did I make any changes or not? And then I think this status message would help. Ralph?
Um, in the context of scenario B, I think for cancel, there might be a reasonable status message and announcing basically the old thumbnail is kept from the old remote source. So it is not removed, but it's because at the moment, as you can see here, I just simulated the scenario by simply switching off the VLAN and then hitting the update metadata. And that way I got that placeholder. And with cancel, that placeholder thumbnail is prevented, and maybe adding something like that, telling the user, hey, you're still using the old thumbnail.
Yeah, I think that makes sense.
I still think that visually, because visually there should be a difference between action was taken or that the action, like the initiated action was cancelled, or the result was changed from what kind of was the original idea. So in a way, I think there should be visual difference if everything goes through as planned versus there is a change on the way. So that if somebody accidentally clicks cancel and doesn't read the status message, then there would be some kind of signal that this is not the same.
So wait, you're suggesting some sort of signal outside of a status message?
Or something that would be visual different. So that's why that warning would be enough, but it's not a warning either. So would it be a crazy idea to have some kind of a some sort of a cancel message, or that kind of a abort message or something like that, so that it would be visual different from going through all the like originally intended changes, so that it would be just when nobody ever reads those messages. When you use a site long enough, nobody ever reads those. So then you got just kind of those, if it's the same color, same icon, about the same size or the same length, then it can go by if it's just like without reading.
Okay, so you're suggesting that when someone hits the cancel button, that we indicate it somehow, but are you making a specific suggestion for how? I'm not quite sure what your recommendation is.
Yeah, well, I could recommend to add another. That's a big change, but I could kind of recommend adding another type of message that would be abort message or cancel message that would have a maybe X icon. What do we have for errors nowadays? Is it that round with X?
I think so.
Yeah. So if it would be just kind of a plain X and some boring color. So we have a
So you're suggesting a status message, but not an info. You're suggesting and not really info, not really warning, and not really error.
Yeah. So that's a big one. But something to make sure it doesn't get confused with kind of your normal success message.
So
if we can't add a new one, then I would put a warning.
So I would say that if I intentionally hit the cancel button and then ignore the status message, that's perfectly okay. The only reason I want a status message is if I accidentally submit the confirmation form. And in that case, I think I'm likely to read whatever status message is there. That's the one case where I wouldn't ignore it. So I think that an info message would be enough. Go ahead, Ralph.
And if you in case of the scenario B, if you accidentally submit the confirmation form, then you simply retry and end up again on the confirmation form in the worst case. So
Right. If it fails again, the confirmation form comes back, and
yeah.
if it succeeds, we get the usual status message. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, if it succeeds, exactly. On success, it's the normal success, the normal updated metadata on media item on fire in that, for example.
Yep.
Yeah. Success message. Otherwise, confirmation form again. Just one step before, the microcopy on the confirmation form for scenario B, should it be simply the remote source for media item X is unavailable, try again later. That's the message we had last week.
Yeah, I think so.
Because it was not clear if that should go in a status message or on the confirmation form, therefore I ask.
Right. I guess we can remove try again later if it's on the confirmation form and one of the buttons is retry.
Yeah. On success message. Yeah, and on cancel is now the only question if it should be an info message or a warning and what should be on that message. Personally, I would still go with my suggestion in that regard, just stating that the old image is kept.
I think that's fine.
Hey all, sorry I joined a bit late, but so yeah, I'm not too familiar with exactly what issue we're talking about, but thought I'd say hi either way.
1 second. I've posted in the chat. It's basically a trigger on here, which is currently called update metadata, and that is triggering an update to either an image or a remote video. If I do here, update metadata, as you can see, the thumbnail is getting updated again.
I see.
And there's also the option for a bulk operation as well.
Yeah, but
So
what we decided last week is that the bulk operation should not be done as part of this issue because it's too complicated to decide what to do when things go wrong in the bulk options. So postpone that to a follow-up issue.
And are we discussing the text and it appears?
Yeah, when something goes wrong, we agreed that there should be a confirmation form asking what to do next. And yes, we're discussing the text for that confirmation form.
Ah, okay.
So for example, for images, for remote sources, could be the case that for whatever reason, a video is taken down or the service is not reachable at the moment the person is clicking the update metadata. And if it's run, as if you've seen before, the thumbnail would be gone. And so basically something would be lost. And that way, having a confirmation form that would be prevented, meaning at the moment on the confirmation form, the message could be the remote source for media item X is unavailable, and a button retry and a button cancel. On retry, on success, you get the usual success message, meaning updated metadata on media item Kali Golden Doodle day 15. And on a failure, you simply go again on the confirmation form. You can basically cycle around with several retries. And at the moment, the question is what to do on cancel. Or what status message or warning message should be displayed.
So any other opinions on these messages? If we don't have a strong consensus, then you can just present a couple of options and we can have a further discussion on the issue.
I think it would be good if they would be like different lengths so that it could kind of there would be other cues that what happened. Yeah, I'm still thinking of that. It's not only because I never read the messages, but because it's kind of easier to notice when something doesn't go the way you expect it to, when it doesn't look exact. So you can kind of catch it easier if it doesn't if it looks strange. Yeah, but maybe that's just me.
Okay, can we wrap up this discussion? Anything more to say?
Just one question.
Yeah.
So let's leave the discussion up for the cancel. What status message should be shown there to the issue? But the question for scenario C, I think the source file for media item X is missing, unable to refresh on the confirmation as the message on the confirmation would work. Do we need a status message at all for remove thumbnail? I don't think so. And for cancel, neither, probably, because here it is sort of clear what will happen.
Well, I think the same comment as before applies that the only time we need a confirmation message is when someone accidentally submits the confirmation form.
Okay, true. Yeah. So basically, for remove thumbnail, thumbnail removed for media item X.
That looks fine to me.
Without the question mark for sure. So and yeah, for cancel, similar. or not necessary. Not sure. That's the same problem then, like with the other cancel button. Okay. Then I'll write up a comment for that. Thank you.
You're welcome, and thanks for bringing it up. For the sake of recording, I want to acknowledge that several people have joined the meeting since it started. So Aaron McHale, Andrei Zvankov, Avani, and Offer Shal. And Avani, is this your first time joining the meeting?
I joined second time actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, welcome back.
Thank you. Actually, I'm new to contribution, so I'm trying to understand and like what's going on the Drupal side. So I have joined this meeting.
Okay. Yeah, you're welcome to do whatever's useful for you and either sit back and listen. And also, if you do have something to say, you're welcome to share. I want to briefly talk about an old issue. So let's see if I'm sharing the right screen. You see the issue for today's meeting?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, and then, oops. Where do we have it? Oh, don't want to show that screen. Where is it? Here we go. Yeah, this is issue 3221259. And I think Aaron will remember this and possibly Ralph. I don't know if anyone else will recognize this, but back in Drupal 9.3, we added the content editor role to the standard profile. And originally the plan was that if, say, the content moderation module was enabled, then this role would automatically have certain permissions from that module. But also in Drupal 9.3, we made a change that that roles are not allowed to have permissions unless those permissions are created by an enabled module. So we had to remove all of those, several of the permissions from the content editor role, and it ended up having very few permissions. So this issue was created to find some way to add those permissions back. And what I realized recently is that now that we have recipes in Drupal core, that provides a method for adding the permissions back. And in, let's see, in my most recent comment, I listed the permissions that we had to remove from that role, some from the content moderation module, some from content translation, and some from media. And then there are some permissions from modules that have since been removed from Drupal core, the aggregator module, the book module, and the statistics module. But I already have a merge request that adds back the permissions from the content moderation module. And I think I can handle the two modules that are still in Drupal core. So just this is an issue we've talked about in the past. I just wanted to give that update. Any questions about this?
No, not now. So thank you so much for this update.
You're welcome. Anyone else? Questions or comments? Okay. Then we're open to suggestions. What other issues should we talk about, Aaron?
Sorry, I was trying to find the raise hand control because I'm using Zoom. I'm using the Zoom app on my iPad, and I think they moved it around. I actually did have a question about this one.
Sure.
I think the standard profile is, last I checked, the intention is to like break it up into small recipes that the standard profile includes. So I just wonder if you'd thought about like would those recipes the enable a module. So if you're thinking in the context of Drupal CMS as well, should those recipes use an action, a config action to add permissions to the content editor role? Or were you thinking that this would be like we just add them to the standard recipe? Like, what's your thinking there?
So you're right. The standard profile was recreated as a recipe, and it's built up of several smaller recipes. But also, there's some optional configuration in the standard profile, and there's and recipes were created to preserve that. So for content moderation, there's already a recipe that there's already optional configuration in the standard profile that creates the standard workflows. And there's a recipe, it's the editorial workflows recipe, that, you know, that has that optional configuration in it. So that's the one I started with. And in that recipe, I say, if you're going to create the workflows, um, also add permissions for those transitions to the content editor role. For the other two modules, I don't think there's yet a recipe that creates those. So I'm thinking of adding new recipes that will enable content translation and assign permissions to the content editor role for the content translation module, and similarly for media. So I haven't worked out the details exactly, but that's roughly my plan. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks, Benji. That makes a lot of sense. And I think if you do that, definitely, because obviously with Starshot, or sorry, Drupal CMS, code name Starshot, there's there's a lot of effort going on around creating recipes and like making sure that certain initiatives going on around that for like media management and all that. So yeah, definitely a good idea to have if they have like a recipe already. Oh, I'm sorry if you just heard my table just decided to move. So that was there was a loud noise there. But if yeah, I think if they have like recipes for like media management and things, definitely a good idea to have those recipes then depend on this one so that in as well as enabling the necessary modules, the permissions already get added. But I'm assuming you're kind of thinking along those lines anyway, so that because recipes can depend on other recipes. So yeah, all sounds good though. Yeah.
So isn't that content translation, is it or is it not in the like Drupal CMS multilingual recipe?
A content translation? Maybe I didn't look too hard. I didn't see any recipes that directly enabled the content translation module,
Yeah.
but it's possible that some recipe enables a module that depends on content translation. So
Yeah, so if there is there is a recipe that's called multilingual, so if that doesn't have content translation, I think it's like it feels a little bit weird, but maybe it's something else. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's kind of example, I suppose, of what I was thinking. Where like, say, there's that multilingual recipe. Yeah, rather than that recipe directly enabling the module, it could like call, it could depend on this recipe that you're talking about, Benji, that would enable the module and add the permissions. Because then the good thing is like if there's other recipes in the community that people want to use to enable multilingual for various reasons, then you have these foundational ones that do certain things.
okay, so I was only looking at the core recipes, and Ralph just gave us a link to the Drupal CMS repository, which has the Drupal CMS multilingual recipe. And yes, this grants permissions to the okay, so this already does that. It grants permissions to the content editor role. So yeah, I should definitely look at these recipes as well as the core recipes. Thanks for pointing that out. Okay, well, I will continue to work on that. I just wanted to give a brief update. And thanks for these comments. So we still have nearly half an hour left in the meeting. What issues should we look at next? That's an issue we looked at a while ago. Ralph, do you want us to bring up either of these two issues? Or
To be
improve links on
honest,
admin people roles? That's sort of related to what we were just talking about.
all fine. I haven't prepared any of the three for today, so
Any other suggestions? All right, so yeah,
go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah, let's have a look at this one. So it is issue 3446753. Improve links on admin people roles. So let's have a look at that page. Oh, and here, let me share the link in the Zoom Slack. Anyone can log into the site. It's the current 11.x with the Mommy demo, and you can log in as admin. And then people roles. And so I guess it's the links in the operations column. Let's see what the issue is about. This is a follow-up to the issue. Edit links on roles admin page are confusing to users. Edit permissions should be the primary link. So the primary link is currently edit. And I'm hovering over it. I don't know if you can see the link in the status bar at the bottom, but it looks like it goes to admin people roles, manage anonymous. There's edit permissions, and there's translate. That issue has a commit and was set to fixed, but was reopened because the work was not complete. But since there is a commit, I will close that one, and I'm creating this one. I find it easier to do git archaeology when an issue has only one commit without a revert as well. I'm not sure that's the usual practice, but for details, read that issue. And the proposed resolution is to make edit permissions the primary link, change the edit link to edit role. This is to restore the Drupal 7 behavior. Okay, so just based on that, I guess the two changes are to make edit permissions the primary link and change edit to edit role, which, by the way, the primary link, the only thing you can do is change the display name of the role.
I think in general, the most used option should be the default, but in a way, there's a symmetry here that everything you can see on the list of roles can be edited when you click edit. So in a way, you can edit what you can see here, but still it's not probably the best way to do it. So when you click edit, you can edit the string you see.
Yes.
So there is some logic there.
Well, let's see
Benji,
Yeah.
I've posted a link to the chat. I quickly applied the merge request on an install.
Okay, thank you. Let me move this next. And people roles, and as usual, Ralph installs with the standard profile and I install with Umami. So if you just look at the tabs, it's easy to see which site you are looking at. And here, edit permissions is primary and edit role goes to what we were looking at before.
Suppose you could also make the argument that they should be alphabetical, in which case the delete option would be first, but I feel like that would be a bad idea. So maybe we shouldn't put delete first.
Yeah, didn't we have an issue to not make delete go first a long time ago?
I don't remember. I know we were talking about the order of this in the context of like content types and things where manage, I think, was it manage permission, manage fields? It's like the default sometimes. Obviously, that wasn't a serious suggestion, but I do think that like we would benefit from having some kind of standard or recommendation around how these operation links get ordered. I like the thing is I like the idea of it being most commonly used, but there's always that trouble of like how do you define what is the most commonly used one? I think generally we can use, you know, this in this case permissions is obviously going to be the more commonly used one. But that may always not be, you know, so cut and dry when if we're talking about in the context of some kind of standard around, you know, or principle around how we would apply this pattern. But I think that's out of the scope for this issue, so I'll shut up now.
Did someone already note that if we apply this patch, the MR as it is, then the operations on the list will have different default than the edit role page, like that. So that's something that is not nice.
So you're thinking of the order of these tabs, subtabs, or local tasks? Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah.
That's a good question. And also, should we change the labels on these tasks? Should we make this edit role rather than just edit? Or is the main title enough of a clue? And has that changed? So this just says roles. Oh, I'm sorry, I wasn't on an individual role. Oops. Edit permissions, translate role, and edit role. So I guess that hasn't changed at all between. So just switching back and forth between the two installations. But the breadcrumbs have changed. Interesting.
But it's still edit role in that context, even though you're on permissions.
Yeah, it's
yes.
Yeah, it's a good point actually about the tabs also having, you know, the name of the tabs being consistent with what's in the operation links. And I think actually, did we get it reminds me of the discussions we've had around the labeling for H1s when you've got tabs. I know, like, again, in the context of like editing a content type, for instance, I know, Ralph, we've had a lot of conversations around making the title or making the H1 be consistent across the tabs. So in this case, it would be, you know, edit and the name of the role, and that would be the same across the tabs. But I don't know if we I don't know if that applies here as well.
May I quickly?
Yeah,
It applies
please.
here, definitely, but the whole H1 issue is postponed or stalled right now. The main work happens in another issue that is fixing, in air quotes, the technical underlyings at the moment. And that hasn't moved in a while. And after that, the final decisions in regards of the order and front loading and so forth, what we've discussed in the UX meetings as well as the accessibility meetings, will be done. But back then, the issue we've discussed was only about bundles and content types. But yeah, it should be across the entire admin UI from my perspective. And I have a Google Sheet already where I've worked on that.
Thank you.
Right. So that's definitely a discussion for another day.
Yep.
So anything else you wanted to say, Ralph?
No.
I know you had your hand up for a little while. So let's see what other comments are on and why it was flagged for usability review.
Just to note, it's not our thing here, but it looks like to me that it has the merge request has degradation with area label.
Okay.
Kind of degradation.
Well, it's kind of without the patch, the default option has area label edit anonymous user, so it repeats the from the table. So if that is excess or not with current stats. But the edit it says as for screen reader it says edit anonymous if it's the button for anonymous user, but this does when the patch changes it into edit permissions, then it looks like it doesn't.
So the context is which role the button is about, the operation is dropped.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that should be fixed.
Sorry, wrong meeting.
Well, as long as you've brought it up, can you guide me to what you're talking about? So where's the ARIA label? On the link. So this has an ARIA label of edit anonymous user.
Yep.
And do the others have ARIA links as well?
The drop button options usually not at the moment in core.
Okay, so just the first
Only
one.
the default one, if I'm not completely mistaken.
So the default one has an ARIA label and default one is edit permissions, which does not have an ARIA label. Okay. Yeah, so not very many comments here. Just Stephen Musgrave suggests that edit is fine, but it still has the accessibility issue of duplicate links on the page. Edit or edit role doesn't work for screen readers. So if we
But
are updating, we should fix the accessibility issue. Go ahead.
yeah, but this is the edit. It does the edit link does have that area label, so it's not. So it does have that area label, so it says which edit link it is.
Okay. So, and I guess that's why the ARIA label is there. So it's certainly the change in this issue is not making the ambiguity any worse. The ambiguity is already there. We have edit, 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 edit once for each role, and that's why we have the ARIA labels, right?
Yep.
Okay. Go ahead, Ralph.
Just one other detail, also mainly from the perspective of a screen reader user. It's not that big of an issue because there are only two options in a row, but usually it's preferable to avoid a redundancy, having two options start with edit. So it's edit permissions, edit role. And that way, yeah, it's suboptimal.
So this is, again, that's not making it any worse, but maybe we can make it better at the same time. So the current state is edit and edit permissions. And here it's edit permissions, edit role.
Yeah, but how about edit, just edit or edit role in that context? And instead of edit permissions, use permissions for anonymous user or permissions for authenticated user. That way the context would be brought in and at the same time edit would be avoided and it would be clear that it's just the permissions for that particular role.
So are you talking about the visual label or the ARIA label?
Either way, both, meaning permissions for, okay. Oh, ARIA label maybe, yeah.
Yeah, I think that adding the role name to the visual label is problematic.
Too lengthy, yeah, that's true. But going with simply just permissions is also suboptimal, but still having edit permissions, edit role in a row feels odd.
But having only permissions, because we don't have a set, like we don't have any way to just view the permissions. So I think well, it might be because I've been using Drupal for a while, but to me it feels like it doesn't need edit permissions because that's we use the same page for both for viewing and editing. So I don't think it should be a problem.
Okay, so let's see. So definitely the ARIA label should be restored to the first item on the list. Adding for anonymous kind of makes it too long. Making it just permissions instead of edit permissions, always less is more. I think that's an improvement. And I think Simo has an excellent point that that we can use this link to inspect permissions as well as to change them. So I kind of like the suggestion of using just permissions. It also has the advantage that it matches the tab. Tab is just permissions, not edit permissions. So I'm getting a thumbs up from Ralph. Anyone else agree, disagree that we should make it just permissions? What is it currently? It's currently edit permissions. All right, it also fixes the problem that we have two things that start with the same word. I get a thumbs up from Ivani and from Andre
I agree. Also, I
and
just
from
updated
Aaron.
my OS and my apps bar is blocking all the reactions apparently.
Yes, Zoom is amazing that we have people on 2 or 3 continents involved in this discussion in real time, but it still has some difficulties.
Kind of ironic if you think about it. The usability groups using one of them a piece of software that has so many usability issues. But
Okay, so I think we have good consensus on this. How about the issue as a whole? Let's start there. So the first question is, should the permissions link be the primary link on the drop button? I'm not seeing any reactions. Thumbs up from Andre. A few people have unmuted. Go ahead. Speak up.
Yeah.
Mm,
I, I think
I'm
it could.
Simo, you go first.
Yeah, I was just saying it. I think it could be. I wouldn't be opposed to it if we fix that so that it doesn't. It behaves more or less the same on the actual on the tabs on the page.
Okay, Aaron?
yeah, I'm sort of I don't have a strong opinion either way. The only thing I would my only concern is just that the ordering then is different from the tabs, but I mean we already have that problem. So, within a lot more places. So we're not necessarily making it that much worse. So sure, permissions is probably the more common action anyway. So until we have some kind of standard around it, then why not?
Okay. Ralph?
Hmm. I have no strong opinion in that regard. I think it's okay.
Okay, so not a strong consensus. I like the idea of putting the permissions first, for the reason stated in the issue, that it's the one that people are likely to use most, and why force an extra click before um, selecting the link you are most likely to use. Go ahead, Aaron.
Thanks. There's also something where a lot of people, I think, at least in my experience, a couple of developers I've worked for didn't realize you could edit permissions for an individual role this way. And when you've got a lot of permissions and the main permissions page literally crashes when you try to load it on a site I work on, it's a really useful page. So yeah, it's probably good in the sense that might bring it to more people's attention that you can do this. So it's a nice side advantage, I guess.
Yes, and that's a problem we've been dealing with for a long time. Um, and we have made some improvements. Okay, so we're generally in favor of the primary change in this issue, um, but not a strong consensus. And then the next question is, what should the label be? So keep it as edit permissions, shorten it to edit permissions, lengthen it to edit permissions for anonymous. And I think the long version, we agree, should only be on the ARIA label, that it should not be part of the visible text. Is that right? Thumbs up from Ralph and from Simo. Aaron?
Yeah, I'm not sure like if we need the word edit for permissions. Like it's kind of if we're not gonna have it like first, especially if you're like a screen reader user as well, like we should be, we've had this discussion before where we talked about you should front load the most important information. So like the word edit is almost like redundant in some ways because if the link is like permissions for role, you're like, okay, I know that's where I want to go because I know I can change permissions there, or at least I can see what permissions are being set. So my feeling is like we don't need the word edit in any case for the link permissions.
Yeah, that's the next question I was going to ask, and I think we've
Yeah.
already brought up these points. So should we shorten it from edit permissions to permissions? I think Aaron, you're saying yes. Ralph gives a thumbs up. Simo gives a thumbs up. Andre, I agree. Okay, so we have a strong consensus there that it should just be permissions. And then the ARIA label, Ralph mentioned in the Slack, rather in the Zoom chat, I think you're talking about the ARIA label. It should be permissions for role.
Yeah, for the ARIA label.
And a thumbs up from Aaron. I think that seems reasonable. Okay, so we have consensus on the label and the ARIA label. Less of a consensus, but still generally positive on making permissions the first item. What else is there to discuss on this issue? I can think of maybe a couple of things. Go ahead, Aaron.
I think like with did we agree that we wanted to have it the text edit role for the edit? Was that the agreement? Or did we not agree that yet?
Right. We've discussed it. We haven't taken a vote.
Yeah. Because
Do you want to say something in favor or against it?
yeah, I mean, I think like I think having edit role is fine. But I think then we might, in the interest of consistency, it might be good to also then change the label of the change the local task, so the tab name to also be edit role. And then that way again it helps distinguish it from permissions when you're actually on the, say you're on the permissions tab when you're in there and you see the edit role tab, it's really obvious, okay, this is where I edit the role itself, I guess.
Yeah, I definitely want to talk about the tab labels, but let's first decide what to put here. We can always change our mind later if we want after we decide on the tab labels. Ralph, what do you want to say?
Just a brief point, because I think it's preferable to have basically that drop button option label sort of consistent with the local task label, and going with edit role is sort of inconsistent with most of the other places in the admin UI, because usually you only have edit as the tab label, as well as as a label in general for a page like that. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, so keeping it as edit has the advantage of consistency. That's what we see other places in the UI. I'd also like to suggest, I'm not sure I'm actually advocating for it, but just something to consider, changing it to edit label. Because after all, that is the only thing you can change. Or edit the role name, I guess. Maybe label is too inconsistent with this page. Any other arguments in favor of any of these options? Edit role, edit label.
I would avoid being too specific about the elements of the form because, a contrib module could add something else. There's an issue to add descriptions to roles. So wouldn't necessarily recommend something as specific as edit label, but I also understand what you're trying to do, and I think you're on the right track, but maybe label is too specific.
Okay. Ralph?
I think, edit role name would be the most specific and most appropriate in that context, but then it's 3 words instead of 1 or 2, so making it lengthy. So
And again, with Aaron's point, that's currently the only thing you can change, but that might not be the case in the near future.
yeah, but then if you take Aaron's point and say that other content is added there as well, then edit role might be also not the right fit, and being completely generic with edit and be in line with the rest of the admin UI might be perhaps the better choice.
Right. So I'm hearing a lot of on the one hand, on the other hand.
Yeah.
So just edit alone has the advantage of consistency.
And flexibility for the future or for the
And
near future.
right. And Aaron's point, edit label or edit role name are perhaps too specific. I guess edit role has the advantage of consistency with Drupal 7, although with Drupal 7 in its dying days, I don't know that that's a strong argument for making the change. And I wonder if the original issue has a discussion of why they want to make it edit role.
Yeah, I don't think consistency with a decade-old CMS is necessarily a good reason. That's a slippery slope right there. Yeah, I'd also point out that in a way, as you said, like edit on its own is consistent with other places. And while it is very like it's not, I'm sure we could come up with a better term. You could also argue that there's bigger problems with the word edit. For instance, if you have a content type where layout builder is enabled for the content items, so like individual nodes, you have an edit tab where you edit the title and other things, and you have a separate layout tab where you go to change the layout. And every time I see that, it annoys me because I'm like, well, I'm editing the layout, but I'm not on the edit tab. So, it's I think it's a bigger problem than this issue can solve.
Okay, well, I apologize. I haven't been paying attention to the time and we're already a few minutes over. So I guess we can continue the discussion on Slack or maybe next week. But I think I should cut it off. I for one have to get back to my day job and probably I'm not the only one. Um, any closing remarks?
I just to say I might not be around the next few weeks because Drupal Camp Scotland is happening at the end of this month, and so it's I'm involved in the planning for that. So it's a busy. My Drupal time on Fridays is probably going to be taken up by that, but so we'll see. But yeah, it's the only thing from me.
Okay. Thanks for letting us know.
If any of you are in Edinburgh in a couple of weeks, just feel free to come by.
Will do. Okay, thanks all for joining. And even if Aaron can't make it, I'll be back next week. Hope the rest of you can come too.
Thank you. Have a nice weekend.
Thanks. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye.